What's up, guys? It's me here, the Midwest Fish Keeper, bringing you part 2 of the 20-gallon long apsitogramma build. As you can see here, this is where we left off on part 1, and this is the completed structural part of the stand. Now, I was saying in that video, I'm going to go above and beyond and plywood it and paint it and make it all nice. So I went to my local hardware store and I got 2 sheets of 1/4-inch plywood, and then I also got a polycarbonate sheet, which will be used for an upcoming DIY lid. I also got some screws and some silicone also for that lid, and some silicone pool filter sand for the substrate. But we're just going to be focusing on the plywood, as that's what I'm going to be sheeting this whole stand. Here is my cut list. This is what I'm going to be cutting 2 of the sheets of the plywood in, so I can create different panels. I can screw them all in to make the stand look really nice. So we're going to go ahead and start the project. Now, I'm not using a miter or a table saw, but I am using a skill saw and a chalk line to get all my cuts, which is turning out just fine, and it works perfect. So now I'm just cutting these panels and assembling them. I'm using screws, but honestly the best method would be to use a nail gun, like some finished nails. I don't have an air compressor, so I couldn't use them. But that would make it way nicer, and it wouldn't cause a big screw hole to see, and that kind of makes it ugly and you have to patch the hole itself. So yeah, I'm just going through and assembling these panels one by one according to my cut list. Here's just a walk around of the stand after I've cut all the sheets and screwed them on. And there's a couple edges that are going to have to get filed, and I'm going to use some corner trim pieces too to hide a lot of the nasty corners and the gaps and the screw holes themselves. But it looks really good. It turned out really nice. I'm also going to sheet the inside as well and sheet the top. Now I'm just sheeting the top, and I'm clamping it down, making sure everything's nice and square before I start screwing down holes, or if there's any big gaps, I'm just going to trim them with my skill saw. I had a bunch of extra plywood left over too, so I had enough to get the inside as well and make it look all nice and neat. And I really like it. If you see there's a bunch of like little gaps around the edges, that's all going to get filled in with trim, so I'm not worried about how it looks right now. But just the rough plywood is done, and it looks fantastic. It's a lot heavier and it's really, really sturdy, but it's an awesome tank stand. And now my next step is to start cutting the trim and getting that to fit nicely. Also, I'm going to patch the holes with some epoxy and then sand that down to make them smooth, and then also file down some of the edges so that the trim fits all nicely. Now we're starting on filing the edges to make sure they're nice and smooth. I went to the hardware store and found some nice utility trim and corner molding as well. That would be perfect for the trim on the stand. Well, at the hardware store, I found this really nice, like 2-foot by 3-foot pine board, and I knew right away that this is the board I'm going to use as my countertop for my fish tank. And so just need a couple little cuts, and it's going to be a nice centerpiece. I'm going to stain it, and it's going to look really nice. And for the bottom of the stand, I didn't use any plywood. I used some like bigger 2x10, 2x12 pieces, just so in case I want to set something heavy. You know, maybe it's like a little fish tank or maybe some type of heavy object, and I don't want to risk that plywood bending. For all the trim pieces, I am going to use finish nails. This is my least favorite part of the project. I had to epoxy all the screw holes, and then I took a wood block and sandpaper and I aggressively sanded the epoxy until it was flush with the wood. This took forever and it was a pain, and definitely if I were to do this again, I should have just gotten a compressor or some right-sized nails and just pounded them in versus screwing everything in, because it just took forever and it wasn't worth it. Now it's time for the fun part. Now that everything's sanded and filed down, now we're putting primer on the whole stand. Basically, this just allows the paint to stick better to the wood and allows us to use less coats of paint. Now we put 2 coats of primer on it, and now they're both dried. Now we're going to start painting the stand. We're going to use a really dark blue. I think it looks great, and it'll really match the dark stain or walnut stain wood that we're going to do for the countertop. We have just finished our first coat of the blue paint, and it looks really good. We have a couple more coats to go. The pine countertop and all the trim pieces are cut the proper lengths, and we are getting ready to stain them. We're going to be using a walnut stain for this project. We're going to be staining all the trim, the shelf bottom, and the countertop with the same stain. Since it's a wiping stain, we just take a little rag, you dip it in the stain, and then we just smear it on the board. It dries really fast, and you only need like one or two coats, and it looks perfect. We're doing this while we're waiting for the first coat of paint to dry. Here is the finished stain. It looks really good, and I'm really happy with it. And this is what the corner pieces are going to look like on the stand. I couldn't help myself. I had to see what it looked like. I didn't assemble it, but I put the countertop on and I put a corner piece on just to see if it matched right, and it does, and I really like it. So we're going to keep continuing on. We're going to keep painting and the second and third coats. Everything is now painted and stained to the right colors. Now it is time to assemble everything together using those finish nails. I'm just going to pound them in with a hammer really lightly, being careful not to split the wood. And now in the next clip, you'll see that it's all done. Looks fantastic. There's the finished stand. Now you'll see me in part 3 where I get the tank all ready. I paint the background. I get the DIY lid. I start aquascaping the tank. Stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss this.